Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. So we're going to start. Notice is hereby given that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, the laws of 1975, notice of this meeting has been sent to all school offices, officially designated newspapers, filed with the Township Clerk, and posted in the Board of Education office 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Would you please do a roll call?
Certainly. Mrs. Berkowitz? Here. Mrs. Rothenberg? Here. Mr. Schlereth?
Here.
Mrs. Sanande? Here. Mr. White?
Here.
And Mr. Rossini?
Yeah, I'm here. So we're going to start tonight with the Board President's report. Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. First, we got to start with the flag salute.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start tonight with the Board President's report, my report. First thing is the board will notice that we've done the committee assignments that we'll be talking about, or you'll see later on in the agenda. If you have any questions or you want to discuss your assignments and what we're going to be doing moving forward, please reach out to me or anyone else on the board. Also, on February 1st, we're going to have board training, and then later on in March, we're going to have additional board training. February 1st is going to be Mr. Fogarty from Fogarty and Hara. And then later on, it's going to be in March, one of the board, school board representatives will come in. Third, with regard to the executive order for mask mandates, that's being in the process of being reevaluated by the state, I believe, and we're going to be waiting on further information for that. And then finally, the district assessment presentation is going to be done tonight by Ms. Signori and Ms. Dowling, so the community can see the results of the district's assessment and perhaps shed some light on all of it for everybody. Let's see what else. That's really the extent of my report, and I guess we'll go to the committee reports. Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Schlereth.
Nothing at the time.
Communications and Policies, Mrs. Sanande.
Nothing at this time.
Curriculum and Technology, Mrs. Rothenberg.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Ms. Dowling will be presenting tonight on the Start Strong assessment, the testing results, and other benchmarks.
Okay. With regard to Finance, Mrs. Pintarelli isn't here. Is there anything that we need to discuss?
Not at this time.
Okay. And with regard to negotiations, there's nothing to discuss tonight, not at this time. And then again with Personnel, the Personnel Committee met tonight, but there's really nothing to discuss here about with regard to the Personnel Committee. You'll see that there's the committee meeting schedule in the agenda, and everybody can please take note of it. Okay, so moving on to public comments on agenda items only. The Rivervale Board of Education is committed to encouraging the citizens of Rivervale and employees of the Rivervale School District to speak directly to board trustees. In order to facilitate this communication, residents and employees are requested, 1, to sign in before speaking, 2, to maintain an appropriate sense of decorum, and 3, to limit their remarks to no more than 5 minutes. The board will also take under advisement the written comments and opinions of non-residents that are submitted to the board secretary. Being mindful of its responsibility to maintain the orderly conduct of meetings, the board retains the right to rule on such matters as the speaker's right to address the board, as well as the appropriateness of the subject being presented. The board's decision in such matters is final. The board also reminds all members of the public that while it subscribes without reservations to the principle of keeping the community informed by policy and law, It cannot allow public discussion of personnel matters, nor can trustees comment on any current or pending litigation. If a matter concerning an employee of the Riverdale School District is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal or the superintendent of schools by telephone, letter, or email. So on agenda items only, I am going to open the meeting to the comments at approximately 11 after 7. And are there any comments on agenda items? So when you come up, you just state your name and sign in, please.
I know the drill.
Good.
Hi everyone, Luana Lustberg. I live on Rockland Ave. I want to address a couple of things tonight. I'm going to start with this. On December 20th, my daughter, a middle schooler, witnessed a high-up administrator jumping up and down in the lunchroom in excitement, sharing the news that she'd be getting her booster shot that day.
Okay, I just have a question, and I'm
Sure.
sorry to interrupt. This would be on agenda items only. Is this something that's on the agenda?
So it ties into the masking and the mandates. Is that something that's on the agenda?
That would be the next opportunity to speak.
Okay, so you want me to come back?
Well, this is the agenda items only part.
Sure, I just assumed that you mentioned masks so that we would be able to come up and speak on that now.
Well, it's not
I
on
can
the
come
agenda.
back.
Okay. Okay. So, just to be clear, it's on agenda items, things in the agenda only. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to say that are on that's in the agenda? The non-agenda items will, of course, come on later in the meeting. Okay, so seeing that there's no comments on the agenda items, I'm going to close it to the public at approximately 7:13, and then I'm going to move over to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to just bring to the attention of the board that the proposed district calendar for the 22-23 school year is on the agenda. Just to kind of remind you that the calendar process involves working with the high school district to align holiday breaks and school closings the best we can. We also need to, of course, take into account the state mandated 180 student days. So we have to make sure that we have all those days in there, as well as our staff days. There are two things I do want to highlight. We do have a later proposed September start date. Usually we start pretty much the day following Labor Day. We have a proposed date of starting Monday, September 12th. This is to accommodate scheduled referendum construction projects that are going to be occurring this summer. And then, of course, that pushes us back a couple of days, just by about 3 days in June. And those last 3 days in June are slated to be half days. This will allow the staff, and it's only half days for students, this will allow the staff time to pack up, get their classrooms ready for the major construction that would be happening next summer as well, and also some time to provide any professional development that we might need to provide. So that is on the agenda this evening. And the next thing is, which I'm hoping everybody is out to hear, and you're excited about it as Ms. Dowling and I are, but tonight we have the district assessment presentation on our Start Strong results. Like I said, our supervisor of curriculum, Kim Dowling, is here, and she'll present those results momentarily. Similar to our fall presentation, there's mandated slides that we have to report out on, but additionally, we took the opportunity in the fall to look back to see where our student data was on NJSLA, and we sort of went back the last 3 years to kind of get an overall picture of what it looked like before the pandemic. We're going to take that same approach tonight. We find that's really important for us to really look at student progress. So first, you're going to hear Ms. Dowling go through some of the mandated slides in the beginning of the presentation. But we decided to add additional information to hopefully provide a clearer picture of our students' academic progress for this year. It's important to note that we really won't have a full grasp on any potential COVID learning impact at this point, and this is why we feel it's so important to really be looking at several data points and also being transparent and making sure that everybody is aware as well. And what we need to do is draw conclusions from the data. We need to ask good questions around the data. We need to then make informed decisions for our students around all of this stuff. So to this end, we're going to share the Start Strong results. And then we're also going to share some of our internal data from Renaissance. Now, it's also important to understand that the Start Strong results are aimed at providing an indicator of the learning impacts over the last year, as well as even the year before that. So, for example, the students took this test in September of this year. So, if you were a current 4th grade student, you took an assessment based on 3rd grade learning standards. So the good news is that the Start Strong results did provide us with some good information for instructional purposes, but it doesn't give us any indication of how well our students are currently performing now, mid-year. And so that's the piece we wanted to sort of add to this presentation and put together. Now, you can certainly draw conclusions that if a student had lack of prior knowledge from last year's standards, you can draw the conclusion, because standards build on each other, that if we didn't sort of address some of those learning concerns early in the year, they would then not be able or have a hard time accessing their current standards. So although we didn't get the formal reports until December, we had to be proactive and make some assumptions and start doing some changes right away in September in order to help our students. So you're going to hear a little bit about that as well, what we did proactively, what we're going to continue to do, and to try to get this bigger picture, because you need to know, school districts need to know what you need to adjust. You need to figure out if what you're doing is working well, so you can choose to continue that, or maybe you need to make some adjustments. So we're going to share all of that with you tonight. Sometimes it can feel like that COVID is like all-consuming in the education world, and it certainly feels like that some days. However, at the end of the day, we're educational experts, and so we need to keep our eye on that at the core of what we are doing, which is really the teaching and learning. And I'm sure if you've been to our board meetings, you have heard me say that numerous times. So I have to say that along with the teachers who are immersed in taking this information and making these important decisions for students, the administrative team, we've been sort of knee-deep in this work. I hope you find the data as valuable and encouraging as we did. We kind of love this stuff. So to us, this is the core of what schools are. And we just feel that, great things happen when we're in school and when we're learning and when we're focused on this. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Dowling, and her and I will sort of present together. Thanks, Ms. Dowling. Go ahead.
Good evening. You can hear me with this? Okay. As Mrs. Signori said, thank you for visiting us for our second district assessment report of the year. Typically, we only have one, but this year we're able to have two. In the fall, we reported out on the WIDA scores and the DLM scores, two separate assessments that subgroup populations of our students completed last spring. And as Mrs. Signori was saying, we also presented out on student achievement in the fall and some previous NJSLA scores from years past. Tonight we're going to focus on achievement with Start Strong data. In the spring of last year, the state government applied for a waiver for NJSLA assessments, which was granted by the federal government. So the students did not complete NJSLA last spring. with the stipulation that our students would complete the Start Strong assessment in the fall. The Start Strong assessment was given to all students in grades 4 through 8 in the areas of English language arts and mathematics, and in grade 6 in the area of science. What you'll notice is different there with NJSLA is typically our 5th graders and our 8th graders take it in science, and NJSLA is for students in grades 3 through 8. The reason that our 3rd graders didn't take this assessment, the Start Strong assessment, is because it was assessed on previous grade level standards. For example, if I'm a 5th grade student, then I was taking the assessment on 4th grade standards in ELA math. If I am a 6th grade student, then I took the assessment on 5th grade standards for ELA math and science. It's important to note that the Start Strong assessments do not replace any local benchmarks. For example, we administer the Renaissance assessment 3 times a year, the fall, the winter, and the spring. And that's really the core of what we're using this year to measure growth and to monitor progress, which we're going to talk a lot about later on in the presentation. And it's also very important to note that these are not going to replace the spring NJSLA assessments for this coming school year. Earlier in the year, back in October, Mrs. Signori sent out a notice of district assessments, which have the specific dates in it that the students will be taking the NJSLA in May. And again, that will be in grades 3 through 8 for ELA and math, and grades 5 and 8 in science. The assessment the state used released high quality items from the NJSLA, but the scoring was a little bit different. If you had heard any of our previous district assessment reports, you will notice that NJSLA has 5 categories of reporting out on where students can either be exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, approaching expectations, partially meeting expectations, and not yet meeting expectations. The score reports for the Start Strong assessments, you will notice, are a little bit different, whereas students are categorized in 3 areas, whether they need less support, some support, or more/strong support. You will also note that this assessment did not cover anywhere near the depth of standards that are on the NJSLA. There was about 10 questions for the English language arts portion of this assessment and about 20 for the math. We also want you to know that the New Jersey Department of Education has recommended that districts do not compare any individual student, school, or district data with any data from the state. Actually, we did not even receive the state percentages. Typically, we receive the percentage of students that met or exceeded expectations in all grade levels and content areas, and we did not even receive that information for the Start Strong, so we cannot compare our students to how the state did. Another item is that the Start Strong assessments were not meant to be predictive of how our students are going to perform on this year's NJSLA, nor should you use them to think about how the students might have performed if they took the NJSLA last year. This assessment is for instructional purposes. It is for us to be able to take a look to see where our students are, how we can bridge that COVID gap, and what we can use to ensure that they're mastering the standards from last year so they can access the curriculum this year. As Mrs. Signori was saying, when we receive the template from the state, we have mandated slides, and then we have some recommended slides, and then we have some flexibility with other areas. The first slide on here is one of the mandated slides that you will see. It just says the amount of students that completed the assessment in the fall. You can see the number of students that were tested in ELA and math and science in grades 4 through 8. The next 2 slides, you're going to see percentages of students in grades 4 through 8 who needed less support, some support, or more support. We are not going to go through each individual percentage. This whole presentation will be placed on our website tomorrow, so if you wanted to go through it in depth, you have time to do that. You can always reach out with any questions if something comes up that you don't think of this evening. But we're going to go through these percentages more in depth a little bit later on in the presentation when we talk about Renaissance and how our students are currently performing. But just so you can see how you can read the data, if you're looking in grade 4, if you go across, 21% of our students in grade 4 in English language arts were identified as needing more support, 27% some support, and 52% less support. You look underneath for grade 5, 8% of our students were identified as needing more support, 19% some support, and 72% less support, and so on. This is for ELA. The next slide represents mathematics. The support levels are the same, and it's read the same. In grade 4, 30% were identified as more support, 29% were identified as in need of some support, and 41% were identified in need of less support. Again, and so on. We're going to be going over this in depth later on when we show you the comparison of how students are currently performing on our Renaissance assessment. Similarly with science, we report out at 22% were identified as needing more support, 38% some support, and 40% as less support. There we go. One of the items that the state requires us to do is if you have more than one elementary, middle, or high school, that you present out on scores individually in each school and as a district. So the next few slides, you'll see grade 4 English language arts and math, and grade 5 English language arts and math broken up. You'll be able to see how our students performed at Roberge in comparison to how our students performed at Woodside. And then the bottom here is how our students performed when combined. Similar with grade 5 ELA. And it's read the same across for Roberge, 11% for more support, 15% for some support, 74% as less support. Woodside, 6% as more support, 23% less some support, and 70% as less support. And the bottom graph is for both schools combined. Math is set up exactly the same, 23%, 25%, 52%. And 36%, 32%, 32%, and the bottom is both schools combined. And the same information for grade 5 at Woodside for math, Woodside and Roberge for math. One of the items that we have to report out on are district subgroups. And in Rivervale, our identified subgroups are Asian, Hispanic, Black, White, Female, Male, and students with disabilities, which is broken up into 2 categories, which you'll see in a later slide, of our students who have IEPs and students who have 504s. These numbers represent percentages, and the red students represent students in need of strong support, yellow students in need of some support, and green students in need of less support. This is as a whole, as a district, for English language arts and mathematics. Similarly, as the last slide, broken up into Asian, Hispanic, Black, White, Female, Male, and students with IEPs. Okay. Sorry. Pressed it too many times. Sorry there. This slide breaks up our data, as I was saying, that it's broken up into students with IEPs and students with 504s. You can take a look at this at your leisure, but it's broken up ELA, math, and science. We will not be reporting out on our populations of students with English language learners and economically disadvantaged. When you have less than 10 students that make up a subgroup, for FERPA protections, we do not report out on them. So you will see in the next slides that although we reported out on certain populations or certain subgroups as a district, as a whole, we will not be reporting out on them by grade level, because although we might have 10 total, we might not have 10 in a grade level. So the next several slides are subgroup analysis for grades 4 through 8 for ELA, and on the left side, math on the right, and on math on the right side. And these will all be posted for you if you want to take a look at how our subgroups have performed. And again, there might be different subgroups for different grade levels. There is science for grade 6, and for grade 8, you are also going to see Algebra 1 percentages on here as well. did it again, sorry. One of the things that we did as a district, even before our students completed the Start Strong assessment, is we knew that we were going to have to do something to bridge this COVID gap, and what we were going to do for the learning impact that COVID has had on our students, and even before COVID, what we were doing with the numbers that we were seeing on our NJSLA reports and internal benchmarks. Which brings us to our internal benchmarks, number one, as Renaissance. We've been using Renaissance data for years, using the diagnostic reports and instructional reports, and our teachers have been using the areas identified, the standards of areas that are identified as areas of growth and the standards of mastery. They have been using specific skills identified by our assessments to use for guided groups or strategy groups. But over the past year or so, we've been taking a look at some different reports that Renaissance offers. We've been taking a look at comparison reports. We've been taking a look at different structures, different standard reports that we can use to really hone in on instruction and how we can ensure that our students are mastering the standards and are able to progress. This year is no different. Our students have already completed the Fall Renaissance and the Winter Renaissance, and they will be taking another one in the spring so we can continue to measure progress. Linkit is our data warehouse where it holds all different information, and this year we're using something called fingertip profiles, where they're giving all of our teachers these digital profiles of each individual student in their class. And we all know that one assessment isn't going to be a good measure of how a student is doing. You need to use multiple measures of assessments to really gauge how a child is doing in your class. And Linkit does this for us. It takes all of our benchmarks, our math benchmarks, Start Strong data, any NJSLA information that we have, any Renaissance benchmarks, any math benchmarks, and for our students in our elementary levels, it also uses TC scores. And it puts it all on one neat page for our teachers so they're able to see the growth of each child using multiple measures. We're also going to be looking at Linkit in a different form in a couple of weeks, which we're going to talk about at a later slide. We have been working with math consultant Meredith Alvaro. She has been working with our staff on really kind of marrying the language that we see in the NJSLA as compared what's in our curriculum and how it looks like in our math series, even our new math series. One of the examples that I have used a few times, you might have heard it, is that when we were looking at our Renaissance data and we're looking at our internal benchmarks, our students were, to us, looking like they had mastered specific standards. But then when they went to look at the same standard on NJSLA, they fell below the state, which brought us to the important question of why, what's happening. So once the state was able to give us some released items, we were able to take a look at why does it look like our kids are mastering this standard in our classrooms, but not on the state assessment. And a lot of it, what we're noticing, is simply the language and how it's asked on the test. It's very unfamiliar because it's not how it looks in our series or in our curriculum. So we had to kind of take that language and make it so our students are exposed to it more often, so they're ready. One of the questions simply can be, as one of our consultants was working with us on, was, is 1/2, Julia believes that 1/2 is bigger than 1/3. It's always bigger than 1/3. Is Julia correct? Well, the way that we have been talking about this together, the way that we teach it and finding common denominators and how we talk to our kids, yes, when you compare fractions, 1/2 is bigger than 1/3. But the word always makes that answer not correct. 1/2 is not always bigger than 1/3. It depends if you're using the same whole, if you're comparing the same unit. If you're comparing 1/2 of a cookie to 1/3 of a cookie, yes, then 1/2 is going to be bigger than 1/3. But if you're comparing 1/2 of a chocolate chip cookie to 1/3 of a pizza, then no, 1/2 is not going to be bigger than 1/3 there. So that's the type of questions we're really getting our kids to be able to talk about their mathematical thinking, looking for key words, and not only talk about it, but then write about it. We've implemented a new math series, Big Ideas, this year. We were able to pilot it last year, and this year is our first year implementing that, which is really very much aligned with our philosophy of mathematics. And we've also implemented a new series for our basic skills kids called Bridges Math, We all know that our students in basic skills need something in addition to, not in replace of, but they don't need more of the same. They need to learn in a different manner. So Bridges has been a success in our basic skills classrooms. We've done a ton of curriculum compacting. And we also have a literacy consultant, Shelley Klein, who's been working with our staff on Patterns of Power, which is a different grammar program, and also on a lot of data analysis and really creating structured guided groups and strategy groups around data. And speaking of data, if you torture it long enough, it will confess. So what does this mean? On the surface, I have just shared with you a lot of numbers and a lot of percentages. But when we look at these numbers and these percentages, we ask ourselves, what does this really mean? And what is this really telling us? And on the surface, it gives us a big picture on how we performed on last year's standards. But we need to ask more important questions, like, how are these standards, what type of information are we going to get from these that's going to affect instruction? And how are we going to ensure that our kids have mastered these standards so they can access this year's standards? And what are we going to do and how are we going to do that? And the first thing, oops, sorry.
So sorry, I started to interrupt you. And, you know, we feel strongly too that data tells a picture. And if you don't find areas to celebrate and areas in need of growth, you haven't tortured the data long enough. We're not doing our jobs then. Every single organization needs to find those things, whether you're a school or whether you're a business. That's how you move forward and improve. So that's why we've also taken probably a little bit longer, because you've got to use the data to be able to make those observations. And that's really why we want to share more than what those mandated slides were. We could sort of just end there and meet our mandate, but what is 20% of needing less support mean? How does that help us? How do we draw conclusions around that? So now you're going to hear about sort of our process and what we do through our intervention strategies, and how do you use the data and get that to the teachers, who then have the incredibly hard task of putting that into lessons and instruction for the students. Sorry.
Thank you. So the bottom snapshot is something that we're able to see in Pearson, which is the platform that the Start Strong assessment was taken on. So as you saw, the surface level of percentages of less support, some support, strong support. But the Start Strong assessment did give us some really good data and really good instructional materials with their reports. Different items than we've seen with NJSLA. Typically, I get excited to see the evidence reports, which tells us the standards that we have met or the standards that we fell below the state. But this report, I was very excited to see, because it not only breaks it down by question, it also breaks it down by standard, concept, and it tells me as a classroom teacher how many of my own students got this question right, got this question wrong, or got this question partially correct. You're able to go in and you're able to see the incorrect, which I know is a little bit difficult for you to say, but it's this column right here. And you're able to go down and say, okay, if I'm here and I see that this question here, I know you might not be able to see it, but that's 10. 10 of my students got number 5 wrong. So I'm going to look at which standard that it accompanies. It's 4.0A.3. So what we have done is we have created these presentation of questions for our staff, which, would you mind just showing? Where they are able to go in and they're able to see every single question that was listed on the Start Strong assessment. They're able to use these for instructional purposes. They're able to take this standard and say, where is this standard in my curriculum, the one that I've built upon? Because remember, these are last year's standards. And if 10 of my students got this wrong last year, then I'm going to need to reteach this, and this is going to have to be a prerequisite before they can access the current standard. This was question number 5. So then they're able to take this question, put it up on the board, have conversations around this question, talk to their students about this question, and make sure that they understand the standard. Thank you. Yeah, you can go back. Thank you. So that's the first piece. And then just give me 1 second so I can cross over to the next one. So then what you can do is you can take that standard and you can plug it into a search engine in Pearson, And, there we go. And when you plug it in, it's gonna come up with all of the questions that surround that standard. This is the information that's gonna help our students move forward and master standards and progress. I can see question 1, 3, and 5 were around the standard that my students had trouble with, but number 5 is the question that I wanna focus on. You can do this for all of the standards in ELA, math, and science, and this is the type of work that we're doing around the data. If you have it just sit here and collect dust and not use it, then it's not meaningful, but our teachers are working tirelessly to use this information to ensure that our kids are progressing, even with 2 years of disrupted learning. One of the other assessments that we've been spending a lot of time on, particularly this year, is our STAR Renaissance assessment. It's our internal benchmark. It's what our students take 3 times a year, and it helps us monitor progress. Their categories are a little bit different than the Start Strong assessment, but similar in that we were able to use them to monitor growth. There in the green is considered at above benchmark or in need of less support. Then they have the yellow and the blue is on watch or intervention or students in need of some support. And then they have the red of students in need of urgent support or that strong support that we saw on the Start Strong assessments. We wanted to measure our growth and see where are our kids now. Have we taken this information from Start Strong? Have we used our benchmarks? Have we used our internal data? So our kids are progressing. Have they been able to access the curriculum? Where are they now in January of 2022? That's the question. And when we're looking at our data, there we go. When we're looking at our data, we have seen tremendous growth. In some areas, and as Mrs. Signori was saying, there's always areas to improve. The goal is to always be better. But here in grade 4 in ELA, in September at our Start Strong assessments, 52% of our students were identified in need of less support as compared to 87% using our Renaissance data in January.
And now just to interrupt you, sorry, Ms. Dowling, and just remember, you're not comparing apples to apples. This isn't the same test. We don't have that. Start Strong isn't being given ever again. But we have to make the assumption, like we said before, standards build. So if a child was experiencing difficultiness with a prerequisite still from last year, they would have a hard time then accessing this current year's. So that's why our job this year was really challenging for not only students and for teachers to really make sure that we were so targeted on the type of instruction and support that we gave the first half of the year, because what you don't want to happen as a district is have the learning disruption continue to build, right? If you missed out on standards last year, then you really can't access the current standard. That gap continues to grow. So we needed to make sure that the efforts we put in play the beginning of this year, are they working? We can make some assumptions around that. So I don't want anyone to think like we're comparing Start Strong to mid-year Start Strong. They're 2 different assessments. One's last year's, one's this year, but you've got to be able to start drawing conclusions. And like I said, if we just stopped at Start Strong, okay, it told us, 23% of our kids needed strong support in the fall. But what does that tell us now? And do we know if our efforts worked? So that's what you'll see some of this. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, you can't improve what you don't measure. So yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mrs. Signor. Okay, similarly in math, you're going to see how our students performed in the Start Strong assessment in September, which 41% were identified as students in less support, 29% some support, and 30% of strong support. Our Renaissance scores for 4th grade math as of 2 weeks ago or a week ago when we finished the assessment, 89% of our students were identified in that green at on or above benchmark or in need of less support. And again, it's not the same test, but these are where our students are now based on our assessments. And again, this is one assessment. We recognize that Renaissance is one assessment just as Start Strong is. We are looking at our big ideas benchmarks. We're looking at TC levels when we talk about ELA. We're looking at formative and summative assessments. You're not just looking at Renaissance and saying, oh, our kids, look, 89% in the green, we're done. No, that's not a reasonable conclusion. That is one assessment. Here we go. Grade 5, ELA in September and Start Strong, 72% were identified as less support as compared to 75%. So we did see some growth there. We saw a big jump in grade 5 math from the September Start Strong assessment at 34% to 84%, looking at Renaissance math in January. Grade 6 ELA, we also saw a small increase here as 61% needed less support in September using last year's standards to 67% in that green or at or above benchmark for ELA in January. And what we're doing with these reports now, the Renaissance reports that we have, is we're taking a look at the growth reports in Renaissance as well. Here we're not measuring apples to apples, we're measuring, apples to oranges, which it measures the same standards, but standards from last year to this year, whereas Renaissance, we're looking how did our kids perform not only in the fall to the winter, but how were they in last spring? We're looking at their spring results to the fall to the current winter results. So sometimes, as Mrs. Signori was saying, not all data is favorable when you look at it. And we saw a little dip here in the grade 7 ELA from Start Strong. 73% were identified as less support to 62% identified as on or above benchmark in the 7th grade ELA Renaissance for the winter. Something we've been having conversations around. We're looking at the growth reports. We're identifying those kids who kind of stayed stagnant or who had a small dip. And we're looking at to create guided groups and strategy groups around certain standards that are identified using our Renaissance assessments and also our in-class formative and summative assessments. Thank you. The grade 7 math. In September, Start Strong identified 46% as in need of less support and 32% as in need of some support, whereas now it looks like that some support is now in the green at 81% identified at or above benchmark in the 7th grade Renaissance math assessment. Similarly to grade 7 ELA, grade 8, we saw a small dip. So then we went into our Renaissance assessments from September to see the growth in our actual Renaissance benchmarks instead of looking at standards from last year. Having these conversations, identifying students, and really differentiating and targeting instruction for each individual child. Thank you. And then the grade 8, in September, with our Start Strong results, 10% of our students were identified needed less support as compared to the 49%. And please note that the grade 8 is not inclusive of the Algebra 1 students. These are students that take the grade 8 assessment, the pre-algebra assessment, not the Algebra 1. One of the reasons that we are looking at alternate benchmarks, which we're going to talk about in a second, is because Renaissance doesn't have an Algebra 1 benchmark. It'll give you a scaled score of how our students are doing, and we can see growth from algebra based on our own internal assessments, but it does not give us a benchmark based on how our students score as compared to other students around the nation. Which brings us to Linkit. We've just thrown a lot of numbers at you, a lot of information at you. For us, this is exciting and information that we're excited to get out to our teachers and use in the classrooms. But we recognize that there was a very large jump in scores in some of the Renaissance assessments. And we wanted to take a bigger look at how are students going to perform on the NJSLA. Renaissance is an adaptive assessment. It's not predictive of how our students are going to perform in the spring when they take the NJSLA. Linkit offers benchmarks that are predictive of how students are going to perform. They have a team of analysts that are hired specifically to analyze the NJSLA and look at the types of questions and the standards that are used on the assessment. In the curriculum world, not all standards are created equal. I think I have said that before. And you might have 40 standards that you need to cover in a year, and 12 of them are going to be consistently on this assessment. So that's what we want to make sure that we're focusing on in our instruction. We want to make sure our kids master all standards, but really focus on how it's asked on these assessments. So we're going to be piloting Linkit benchmarks in the upcoming month to see if this assessment better serves our students and our teachers and gives us better information, better reports. And start asking the important question of, is this something we want to move forward with, or do we want to continue using Renaissance? We do recognize that we're going to be taking another couple of periods for ELA and math away from instruction for this benchmarking. And this will just be for this year, as we're able to more clearly compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges, and how we can say with our staff what is best for us, and how can we ensure that our students keep progressing and master standards and move forward and help that learning impact that has occurred over the last couple of years. At this time, the presentation is over. Thank you so much. And I don't know if anyone from the board has any questions.
Hello. I do just want to thank Mrs. Dowling again. She really is sort of the effort and machine behind all of this. She really, aside from, I think, just loving data, she really kind of tries to package it, put it in like digital folders. And I want to also publicly thank the teachers. This is still not a typical year, as much as we are trying to get ourselves back to a typical year. You might have heard me say this before, that although COVID continues to want to just be at the forefront, it's our job to make sure that we navigate COVID, but we get back to teaching and learning and really focus on what matters for our kids. So I just wanted to really publicly thank the teachers for taking this data and getting our kids to progress as much as they can, and for Ms. Dowling for getting all that information to them. And you might not love data as much as we do, but I hope you did find some value in the presentation today. And like I said, we are very much about creating the whole picture for the board, for the community. We share it all. We share the good, the bad, the ugly. If you don't find areas of improvement, you're not looking hard enough. It's not about painting rainbows and butterflies, although our data is pointing that our kids are progressing really well this year. We still aren't settled till we're settled. So that's why we're still going with some other data and classroom performance as well. So thank you, Ms. Dowling, for putting this all together for us.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
It's more of a comment and maybe a question too, which is, to me it's amazing that you were able to distill all of that data so you can make a presentation. So I don't know how much time that takes to go through all that stuff, and then to get to this is just terrific. And then the other thing I just wanted to emphasize, which I think is true, and you can correct me, that not only were you able to take this data, but you're also able to give actual concrete instructions to each one of our teachers to follow through with this, right? So we're not just looking at just some numbers and figures, say, well, what are we going to do with it? It's actual concrete, something concrete we're going to do with this. Is that right?
Yes, and as Mrs. Signori was just saying, the teachers have been phenomenal. They want this information. They want to use this in their instruction. And it's something that's helpful for them to be able to just pull up when they have so much on their plates right now. They can just take it and go with it, and they can see exactly where it falls into their instruction and into their curriculum.
That's terrific.
Thank you.
Any questions at all from the public about the presentation? Sure.
I was just curious. I noticed because you in some of the comparisons you were doing the Start Strong comparison to the Renaissance January comparison, but you do Renaissance in September also, right? Did you do a comparison with the
Yes, we did. We did comparisons to Renaissance. We run reports for that all the time, and each year we did see growth, but we wanted to just show you how our kids were in the percentages in Start Strong to where we are now.
Yeah, we found because Start Strong focuses on fall, it's an important it's an important conversation to understand, okay, but where are they now as well?
Right, but could you show us the data? Because then maybe we'd be able to see, it shows a great improvement with the Renaissance versus the Start Strong. But is the Renaissance versus the Renaissance showing the same great improvement
Yeah,
or no?
so you as a
That would be
parent,
helpful,
you
yeah.
can get that data on your own child, and you can look at their specific Renaissance data from fall till now.
Okay.
So that would be helpful.
My
because-
children are too young, that's why.
Oh, okay. Too young as in,
Second grade.
oh, well, but you can get their Renaissance data in second grade from fall until winter.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Yes.
all of our students, K-8, take the Renaissance.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right.
Yeah, you can ask the teacher to get those reports for you. Ms. Dowling also helps out, again, because sometimes if there's a lot of requests, we want our teachers focusing on instruction and not printing out reports, so Ms. Dowling also very helpful with that as well.
Yeah, you're welcome to reach out to me. You could just send me an email. I can get you those reports.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, that was really informative. Thank you very much. So that was the superintendent's report. Is there anything else you want to mention?
No, that's all I have for tonight. We can move on to the board secretary report.
Okay, great. So, Mrs. Ippolito?
Hi, good evening, and thank you. Just want to remind the board that if you're interested in attending any of the NJSBA workshops, webinars that are on the agenda, please reach out to myself or my assistant, Christina, so that we can register you, because you have to go through us. Also, very pleased to report that thank you to our Director of Technology, Mr. O'Gara, who completed a USAC First Wave Emergency Connectivity Fund Program. We are in receipt of funding for devices in the amount of $178,000, which is money that we had not anticipated. We will put back into the district as we start to refresh our devices. So thank you very much, Mr. O'Gara, for your time and your efforts. Another reminder to the board, the school ethics, personal, relative, and financial disclosure forms are now available and are due in as of April 30th. The information should have been sent to you from my assistant. If you did not receive it or you need assistance, again, please reach out. Our audit has finally started. It started last week. It seems as though it may be pushed back a little bit further in terms of our final reporting due to GASB 75. We're waiting the state to release information, and as soon as we get that, we'll report out. Also, just to bring to your attention that under an addendum, because we received the information just yesterday after attorney review, we opened bids for the Roberge renovation project last Wednesday. We will be awarding, we had 13 bidders, and we will be awarding that under an addendum. Also, we opened bids for the Woodside rooftop HVAC renovations last Wednesday. We will be awarding that later on as an addendum. Tomorrow, we have a bid opening for the Holdrum project at 1 o'clock. And on the agenda, we are also going to be setting a bid opening for March for the Woodside roof. So lots of renovation, referendum information, and we're very pleased with the turnout. I should have said that for the Woodside renovations, we received 6 bidders. So very pleased with the turnout, and both projects within budget, so that's always a plus. And other than that, that's all I have to report. Thank you.
That's good. I'm glad we got a lot of bidders. That's very good. So now we're going to move on to general resolutions. General resolutions G1 through G5. Anybody want to move it?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? Okay, and you'll see in G5 the committee assignments. Okay, any discussion? No? Then roll call, please.
Certainly. Mrs. Berkowitz? Mrs. Rothenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schlereth?
Yes.
Mrs. Snande?
Yes.
Mr. White had to leave. Mr. Rossini?
Yes. Okay. So now we're going to move on to business resolutions. Business resolutions B1 through B11. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Second, anybody?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion, please. Okay, seeing no discussion, roll call?
Certainly. Mrs. Berkowitz? Mrs. Rothenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schlereth?
Yes.
Mrs. Snande?
Yes, but I'll abstain from B10F.
And Mr. Rossini?
Yes. And then now moving to personnel resolutions P1 through P9. Anybody want to move it?
Sure, I'll move it.
Okay, second, anybody?
I'll second.
Okay. And if there's any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Mrs. Berkowitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Rothenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schlereth?
Yes.
Mrs. Snande?
Yes.
And Mr. Rossini?
Yes. Okay, and we're going to handle the contracts under new business.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So now we're up to the public comment section on general items. The Rivervale Board of Education is committed to encouraging the citizens of Rivervale and employees of the Rivervale School District to speak directly to board trustees. In order to facilitate this communication, residents and employees are requested, 1, to sign in before speaking, 2, to maintain an appropriate sense of decorum, and 3, to limit their remarks to no more than 5 minutes. The board will also take under advisement the written comments and opinions of non-residents that are submitted to the board secretary. Being mindful of its responsibility to maintain the orderly conduct of meetings, the board retains the right to rule on such matters as the speaker's right to address the board, as well as the appropriateness of the subject being presented. The board's decision in such matters is final. The board also reminds all members of the public that while it subscribes without reservation to the principle of keeping the community informed by policy and law, it cannot allow public discussion of personnel matters, nor can trustees comment on any current or pending litigation. If a matter concerning an employee of the Rivervale School District is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal or the superintendent of schools by telephone, letter, or email. So I'm going to open up this part of the meeting to public comments at approximately 8:05 p.m. Okay. You would have missed out on that great presentation. So
I know, it was great, and I appreciate all of your hard work. Okay, hello again. So on December 20th, my daughter
I'm
witnessed...
sorry. I didn't hear, last time I didn't hear your name. I just want to know it so I
Sure,
can respond.
Luana Lustberg.
Thank you.
On December 20th, my daughter witnessed a high-up administrator jumping up and down in the lunchroom in excitement, sharing the news that she'd be getting her booster shot. On the same day, another teacher shared a story about her son being mad at his unvaccinated friend, who he was supposed to go out with because he had to cancel due to a COVID exposure. This implies to me that an unvaccinated child is a disappointment and inconvenience to others. A few months ago, I sat in this very room and I asked the Board of Education if our teachers would be promoting vaccine. I was told no. In fact, I was told that it would be extremely inappropriate. Our teachers are not giving out pamphlets. They're not telling the kids to be vaccinated. They are not telling unvaccinated kids that they are dirty, but they're making implications. They're being sneaky. They are saying things to the children, and it is not right. No child should be made to feel like a disappointment over a medical choice that their parents have made for them, and no adult should be shaming another child within her classroom. As the Board of Education, you've made it abundantly clear that you're concerned about the mental and emotional state of our children now more than ever, as you should be. We all are. I find it alarmingly counterproductive for you to implement these new programs and hire experts while still forcing our children to wear these masks that, again, do not prevent the spread of COVID. In fact, to quote Dr. Leanna Wen, an emergency physician and professor at George Washington University, cloth masks are a little more than facial decorations. There's no place for them in light of Omicron. Day after day, I hear stories of children coming home and venting to their parents over the masks. I'm sure you're all tired of hearing us come up here and speak about the masks. I'm tired of speaking about them as well. My child has stressed to me that she's too nervous to ask for a mask break in her classroom. She's requested them while engaging in physical education. She's made to walk across the room and stand alone while she breathes fresh air. It's shameful that our children are being forced to breathe in their own snot while at school. While at schools in a neighboring town, the children are breathing freely while they're in gym class. I can't understand why the next town the kids can breathe freely during gym class, but in our town we can't. Society has shamed our children into believing that they need to constantly keep their faces covered, regardless of the way that they feel. We teach them to advocate for themselves, to speak up, to share their feelings, but not when it comes to masks. You have to sit, you have to pull your mask up and keep it up. Lastly, I'd like to inquire about the test to stay approach. It's been months of unvaccinated children being discriminated against and forced out of school for no reason. Vaccinated adults get COVID. Vaccinated children get COVID. Unvaccinated children are forced out of school every time they come into contact with COVID. The unvaccinated children are sick until proven healthy. I'm truly astonished that we're still playing this game after what's unfolded over the past few months in regards to both vaccinated and unvaccinated being infected with COVID-19. There are major issues that are not being addressed, and frankly, parents are sick and tired of watching their children miss out on an education and socialization so that they can isolate their healthy children. I think you can all understand why we're so frustrated. None of us like keeping our healthy children home. They should be in school. They should be with their friends. They should be engaging in in-person learning. So my first question to you is, have you looked into the test to stay approach? And is that something that our school can do?
Yes, we have looked into that. I've actually attended many webinars, reached out to the county level, as well as some of our colleagues. The Test to Stay program, what is difficult about the Test to Stay program is the state doesn't have the tests to provide us to be able to do that. We are still trying to see if that is an option. We also reached out to some testing vendors to see if they'd be able to pick up the Test to Stay program for us. and they have told us that they are overwhelmed and are not able to provide us with that. In addition to that, although I know this is not going to be what anyone wants to hear, the Test to Stay program right now is for vaccinated students. And that is a concern of ours as well. So we are still having conversations with our state and local authorities to figure out how we realistically get this in play, if it's an option. But we don't have the tools to do it yet, nor does it seem as clear-cut and as we were hoping it to be, but we are still pursuing it.
So there really is no option for an unvaccinated child to get back to school after a COVID exposure. Is there any data on how many children who are exposed to COVID in schools are actually getting COVID from being exposed with a mask while seated 3-6 feet apart, whatever it is?
Yeah, the good news is most of our kids, you are right, that go home as close contacts, most of them don't get it.
Okay.
And that is why we are trying to find ways to keep our kids in school as much as we can.
Right. Is there anything that we can do to push the governor or a higher up to encourage them to implement something different, because our kids are missing out on an education?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, everyone obviously has their right to sort of band together and go to your local legislation, your state departments, and try that route as well.
Okay. And my last question for you is, how are you going to address these teachers and encourage them to keep vaccination statuses out of classrooms? It is so wildly inappropriate for a child to be asked if they're vaccinated, which is something else that happened. It's inappropriate.
So my suggestion with that is, because it is personnel, so I want to be very careful about talking that in public. If you do find that, I would go to the administrator of that school and ask and try to get some more information, because you are right. We have said before that is inappropriate for any staff member to ask a student's vaccination status or to insinuate that they should be vaccinated. We even know that our union, which obviously represents the collective group of teachers, is also very much in agreement with that. So if you found that you have a different experience that would fall under personnel, you go to your school's administrator to talk about that specific example.
My issue is that these are the stories that I've heard about because I encourage my kids to come home and tell me what's going on in the classroom. If these instances have happened, I'm sure there are more times that this has happened.
I don't know. That's why it's important that we can't address things that aren't brought to our attention. So if you feel
I'm bringing this to your attention, and I feel alarmed that this is happening in all 3 schools. And there's nothing that I can do to stop it.
You should go to your administrator of your school. That would be your first step for that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Megan Fulham, 180 Doretta Street.
Sure, good evening.
Hi. I'm here to speak to you today about my concerns as a mother of a 2nd grader at Roberge, but please also know that I'm a local middle school teacher in the Pascack Valley, and I am in the thick of it with students all day. Childhood is not something that anyone gets to relive. They are years of our life that we don't get back. As we grow older, they merely become memories, hopefully fond ones. It saddens me to think that when my son looks back on these formative years, all of the good things like his first successful wrestling season, his introduction to elementary school, parties with friends, vacations with family, will be clouded with frustrating thoughts of masks, social distancing, school closures, and loss of activities and experiences. The kids are not okay. Anyone who says things like, oh, kids are so resilient, or they don't even care about the masks, is wrong. Of course they care. I watch all day long as my 6th grade students fiddle with them, pulling them away from their face so that they can just take a deep breath. They ask me to change them because they're wet or they're dirty, and they even ask me for a break, looking so distressed and uncomfortable. I constantly have to ask my students to speak up or repeat themselves, which then makes them more self-conscious and nervous. When they're given the option to work with a classmate, I watch as they all nervously gather together, unsure of how close they're allowed to be to their seatmate. My students are becoming more and more disengaged, indifferent, and anxious. Misbehavior is at an all-time high. I have never in 15 years as a teacher struggled with classroom management and discipline like I have in the last 2 years. Our children are frustrated, overwhelmed, and burdened with the fears of the adults around them. They smile and say they're okay because they are predominantly rule followers. They've been told to wear the mask and keep their distance, and so they do, but they're not okay. My 7-year-old has always loved school. He's been in school since he was 6 months old, and he has never once complained. This year, he now often says he hates school, and that absolutely kills me. He is smart and social and well-behaved, and I know that his feelings have nothing to do with his abilities or his wonderful classroom teacher or a lack of friendships. He feels like this because school now means almost 8 hours with his face covered. It means not being able to sit right next to a friend at lunch. It means having white circles on his classroom floor because he needs to keep his desk inside of them. It means being told not to breathe in another student's direction, and yes, he was told this by a teacher. It means indoor recess is sitting alone at your desk, drawing or staring at a computer screen because, playing cards would be too risky. It means if he's too close to a classmate who tests positive, he'll then have to sit home in isolation from his peers and watch his class through a computer screen for 5 days. How can anyone think that this is okay? How can anyone believe that all of this is a better option than potentially testing positive with COVID and being asymptomatic or possibly suffering cold or flu-like symptoms? How can we continue to do this to them? COVID is endemic. It is not going away, and our children are the least at risk, and yet they are being treated like vectors of disease. I'm not naive. I'm not going to say this is no big deal because I do know that to some families it is. I know that COVID has caused suffering and loss. I am not trying to negate that. But it is time to move on and find a way to live. And how we do that should be each family's choice. Because what we are doing to our babies and this way of life is not living. It's quite contradictory, actually, to act as though the masks are saving lives when we are literally impeding the lives of our children. If I can go to a bar or a restaurant unmasked and sit next to strangers, my child should be able to attend school unmasked. I'm continuing to remain hopeful that New Jersey's mask mandate will be lifted on February 10th, and if and when it does, I'd like to know that the Rivervale Board of Education will follow suit and lift mask requirements for our children. And in addition, to piggyback off of what Luann had said before, the CDC recommendations for quarantining close contacts are exactly that. They're recommendations. This is not a mandate. We have to stop keeping perfectly healthy children at home. I do not personally know of one child who was quarantined from a school close contact who ended up testing positive. That's disgraceful, and it's so unacceptable to do to our kids. Enough is enough. According to the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory, depressive and anxiety symptoms have doubled during the pandemic. And according to the U.S. Department of Health Vital Statistics, which was reported in November of 2021, there were approximately 2,400 child suicides in the U.S. in 2020. Children were the only age group to show an increase in suicides from 2019 to 2020. Our children's most important years are passing them by, and we are failing them each day that we allow all of this to continue. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amanda Mendez.
Hello.
And
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to say thank you for the report earlier. I am happy to see that you are focused on data. We are focused on learning. Ultimately, that is the number one goal for school, for our kids, is that they are actually achieving academically. But although we are focused on learning, I also have concerns as a parent as to whether my kids are receiving a very well-rounded education and an overall positive experience when I send them to school every day. I'm here to make sure that all of you understand that my kids are struggling. My kids are not happy. They are having a terrible educational experience. I have 3 kids at 3 different schools, Roberge, Holdren, and PV, and they now despise school. They hate going to school every day. Sunday nights at my house are absolutely miserable. They become completely overwhelmed with a sense of dread and anxiety about returning to school Monday morning. They're struggling academically and especially socially. It breaks my heart because it's my job to make sure that my kids have everything that they need to succeed. So I am here tonight to advocate for them. The COVID restrictions are absolutely hindering their education, and many of us are at our breaking point. I'm not here to beat a dead horse because I realize no one wants to hear my opinion on the effectiveness of masks, quarantine, social distancing, etc. No one wants to hear it because the response is that we're going to pass the buck and claim that our hands are tied, there's nothing we can do, we must accept it. I've been patient, I've accepted it, but at what point do we start thinking critically and challenging these arbitrary mandates? Mandates are not laws. At what point do we start listening to parents about what's best for our kids, blindly listening instead of blindly listening to politicians in Trenton? I know what's best for my kids, not Governor Murphy. Other towns have fought back, and they have made masks optional. There's a class action lawsuit challenging Governor Murphy right now. But while this gets settled in courts, my kids continue to suffer. The long-term repercussions will be undoubtedly catastrophic. You are our elected board members who we voted for, who are supposed to be representing us as parents for our children. And many of us are afraid to stand up here. It is hard to come up here and voice our opinions. But at some point, we have to stand up and we have to ask you to fight for us. Our kids need to see their friends' smiling faces, their teachers' faces. They need to get back to normal, where they aren't treated like infected lepers if they sit next to a friend who tests positive for COVID. Like the other 2 moms just shared, the close contact quarantine is keeping healthy kids at home, away from the school, away from social, and it's detrimental to their overall learning. The psychological effects are also so harmful. I've voiced my opinions on these masks back in August and September, and I had hoped that Murphy would be voted out, but now it's almost February, and Murphy keeps doubling down as other states move away from these ridiculous guidelines. Now we are all waiting for the next date in February, February 10th, when this may be challenged by the legislature. But what if nothing happens? What is our plan B? Because I'm tired of waiting for things to change. I pay a lot of money to live in this town and send my kids to school. And I'm not really getting my money's worth when my kids are crying because they don't want to go to school. So I am asking you, what is our plan B? The close contact quarantine, those are CDC guidelines, just as she said. At what point do all of you actually decide to go against the grain or go away from the norm and do what's best for the kids? Because keeping healthy kids at home and not in school is not doing anyone any good. So I am asking you, what is the plan?
So the board has been having discussion around what would happen if the executive order is lifted. And we will continue to have those discussions. It is also valuable, and we appreciate your guys' feedback as well. We can't make decisions solely based on that, but it certainly is taken into consideration because you are a large stakeholder for us. We are waiting for further information from the state to see what guidance they're providing us. So for example, if the mandate gets lifted, does that now require more close contacts and more kids home from school? Is it going to be a tiered approach, etc.? So we are having all of those conversations, and we will be ready to make a decision should it get lifted. Of course, if it gets extended, our hands are still tied, but rest assured this is also something that weighs very heavy on everyone here as a collective board. And like I said, anyone who emails or does speak, we do record the response, and that weighs into it as well. So we appreciate you coming up. I know, like you said, it's hard to come up and say it, but it's all valuable to hear the feedback from our community.
Thank you for that. I do appreciate it. I guess my question is, with the close contact, it's not a requirement by the state.
It's not a mandate. It's a little bit different, and if you want, you're certainly welcome to reach out to me so we can kind of go into a little bit more detail. Together I can kind of help explain that a little bit more.
I mean, obviously there have been a lot of kids who have come down with COVID. My kids did in December. I'm actually really happy they just got it out of the way, and now they're good for 90 days and they don't have to have close contact. But it's actually, in my opinion, it's hindering us getting through this. The more we keep, in my opinion, everyone's going to get it. It's incredibly contagious. If we keep keeping people at home and keeping people apart, it's just going to prolong. Let them all get it. It's a very mild, I'm not saying that it's nothing. I'm not trying to minimize it, but I don't see the point. And I just think that it's something that really should be considered, and not just, this is what everyone else is doing, so we're going to do it too.
Sure.
And I think that more, when these decisions are made, I would encourage you to obviously the board is elected and it's supposed to be representative of the parents, but have you considered having some type of parental committee or more parent advocates that would be able to voice and, give their opinion before you make the next decision?
Well, I think that's what this avenue is for. That's why I'm saying it is great that you guys show up and you respectfully...
Right, but there are so many people that they just feel like our hands are tied, it's Governor Murphy, there's nothing we can do about it. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot for even us that are here to get here. There are so many more that are afraid to speak up. So if it were maybe put out that, look, this is going to be a community, we're going to come together and make the decision that's best for all. If you are interested in being a part of it, please come to this meeting, or please fill out this Google form, or take a poll or a survey or something that helps people understand that they do have a voice, they do have a say in what gets decided for our kids.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That's what I'm saying. If you ever want to talk, and I can explain more, because there's differences between executive orders, mandated policies that we have to have, things fall under different ones. So it's not as easy as that, but it is. It's complicated for everyone, and it's, you hear us keep saying, like, we might have to deal with COVID, but yes, we all want to try to get to a point where we can get our kids back to learning the best they can, socializing. We tried to bring back a lot of those activities that they haven't had a chance in the last year and a half to experience, and still navigate those hurdles.
Right, and I'm not minimizing this for anyone. I know that it's hard on the parents, it's hard on the teachers, the administrators, and if people are still really scared about COVID, I completely respect their position to wear a mask or send their kids into school with a mask, but it should be optional. I don't want my kids to keep wearing masks every day. It's just not normal and it's not okay.
Thank
So,
you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Nick Marcanis, 461 Revelle Road.
Hi,
My
good
question-
afternoon.
How you doing? Has there been any thought to not waiting for Governor Murphy to remove his mask mandate? Because can I ask, what's the consequence currently for a student or staff member not wearing a mask in school?
Sure, I can answer that. Sure. Yes, we have looked into that. And believe it or not, it is a bit extreme. It falls under a disorderly conduct person charge. It could be fines, and it even could be up to 6 months in prison. There are severe consequences to not listening to the mask mandate, not adhering to it. We have asked since last summer about that and continue to have those conversations.
Yeah, because in his executive order, doesn't he allow the school districts to set their own consequences?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
No?
We've consulted with our board attorney. Yeah, so that's nothing that I'm aware of. If you have that, please send it to me.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Jennifer Falcoff. I live at 558 Whittish Terrace. I just wanted to mention, I wasn't sure if you've seen the most recent data, but since, we talked so much about data tonight, I just thought I should mention that you may want to look, because I just heard about a new study within the last couple days that said that students they found a 354% increase in speech delays. Currently because of, that they are attributing to the mask wearing. So I just thought that was something, especially at the elementary level, that I don't know if you're noticing an increase in your need for speech services, but 354% is, just astronomical. So I just wanted to mention that if you haven't seen that study yet, then you should definitely take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie Marcantonio, 557 Westwood Avenue.
Hello, good evening.
I would actually like to understand why during physical activity, during gym, the kids are still required to mask when several neighboring towns do not require kids to be masked during gym.
Sure. So I believe that that conversation, I can answer, I can address that a little bit. However, you should again reach back out to the building principal, because if children are engaged in high intensity activity, they are not masked. There are some times in PE class that kids are not engaged in high physical activity. They're learning about certain muscle groups. They're learning about hand-eye coordination. They're learning about certain skills. So in those incidences, they would be masked. But in high intensity, they should not be masked. We also try to get kids outside as much as possible this year to provide them with that mask break as well.
Okay. I personally do low impact workouts, yoga, bar, Pilates, that's low impact.
I breathe very heavily when I do those workouts. My heart races. If I put a mask on myself during low impact workouts, I will pass out. My daughter was playing volleyball with a mask on. So what's the definition of high aerobic? I mean, mine is low impact, and my lungs, they breathe, and I require air even during low impact. So why is my daughter wearing a mask during soccer or volleyball
Well,
in
that's what
gym
I'm saying. I
class?
would go back to the teacher, because again, we don't have very many phys ed teachers in the district, just due to the size of our district, so we don't want to get into anything personnel. So I would, reach back and circle back to that. I will tell you that we do our best to stay within the mandate and not extend anything greater than that. So if it's a particular question about an activity, I'd get some more clarity on that. And I do know that, like I said, we really stay with what we have to stay with, what the mandate requires, and nothing more than that. So if kids are running around, they should not have their masks on.
Okay, so whose decision would that be? The teacher or the principal? Like, whose decision is it on what constitutes activity and how much breathing they actually need? Whose decision is that?
That decision comes down to both the phys ed teacher as well as the principal of that building.
Okay. Okay. Also, I do want to mention something. I run a local Rivervale Facebook group, and I conducted a survey.
Yes.
The question was, if masks were optional in our kid's school, would you still send him or her in with a mask? And just for the record, I wanted to say that over 61% of those respondents had said that no, they do not want to mask their kids, and they should be optional. So I just didn't want to mention that. Also want to I know that the others had mentioned about keeping healthy children at home. I do think that that is a big issue. And like you mentioned, out of all the kids that have been quarantined for close contact, most of them have not gotten COVID.
I just want to clarify, right, it's not all. We have had some, but yes.
Okay. And I also do agree with Luana that everybody at some point will get COVID, including our children, and by keeping them at home and distancing them and the masks, we're just prolonging their exposure. My kids had COVID, we all had COVID, they're fine. I understand that, again, this is a very serious virus and a lot of people are not fine, but most kids do, very well with it. They're usually done with it in a day or two, but by prolonging their exposure, we're just prolonging their pain and suffering with this virus. I mean, it's just gone on too long. My kids are suffering. They also do not want to wear the masks anymore. They're tired of it. They get headaches. They're fatigued. It's too much for them, and it's affecting their studies. It's affecting their mood. It's affecting their mental clarity. And they just don't want to do it anymore. And I'm heartbroken for them when they come home from school and they rip off the masks and they're finally breathing, and I'm suffering for them because I can't take it anymore. It's just too much. We really need to figure this out. I don't know how we're still in this 2 years later. I understand that you're saying your hands are tied, and I respect that, but at some point we really have to consider pushing back. If the mandate is not lifted, the executive order is not lifted on February 10th, we really need to figure out a way to push back on this because kids are just suffering and they're not fine. Yes, kids are resilient, but this is just too much. They're not fine. They do follow instructions because they have to, but they're not fine. Ask the parents, talk to the parents. I know many parents personally that could not be here today. Their kids are not fine. Depression is at an all-time high. They're suffering, and we need to help them. This is not right for them. This is not fair. And our first priority really should be the mental health of our children. In addition to the wonderful presentation that you did, it's fantastic, and I really enjoyed it, but the mental health of our children is just as critical. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Hi there. I am Marielle Lennon from 808 Arcadia Place. I have a different, I guess, perspective because my child does not go to school here anymore. Mrs. Signori, I know you know me from last year, and I can't send him here. He was just in kindergarten. That was our first experience with public school. And I knew pretty quickly, like within the first 4 weeks, this is not happening. So we stuck it out, and I had him in another kind of supplemental educational school in the afternoons because, you know, kindergartners eventually went to 5 days, but that wasn't until March, and they never went back to full day, and he hated school, and his handwriting looked like crap, and I was like, we're not starting out this way, fine. But I know a lot of parents who have no choice, and their kids are in school, right? And they're subjected to, day in and day out, all of the stuff that you're hearing. And I know probably most of you are parents, I'm assuming. The pushing back, I guess what we're trying to ask, yes, we email and write letters to our senators, our assembly people, our governor all the time. As a school, as a district, there are ways that you might be able to help just push back even harder with us supporting you so that we all do get a choice and a voice. And maybe one day my son can come back here. I also have a little guy at home. I mean, I have no idea if they'll ever be back in the school. But it feels like neighboring towns find ways to not just sit and say their hands are tied. I'll give you an example. A good friend of ours is a principal in Jersey at a school, an elementary school, and he changed the duration of their lunch, the time they're eating with their masks off, to 13 minutes, which is fast. I don't know if ours is already that or not. It eliminates a lot of that close contact, right? So there are ways, even in this small way, of having some control, of feeling like you can help these kids that are so much struggling. I know we're all just people. I understand that we're not all the same. Some of us will die with a mask on our face, 80 years from now because of the trauma of all this crap. But not everybody wants to have one on, and they shouldn't have to. And every child who has not ever seen their friends' faces in school ever, because this is their first time in school, it's sickening. This is a sign of fear and control. This is fear and control. This is not a medical device. None of them that you're wearing. Maybe that one a tiny bit, maybe. But this is not protecting you. So what happens to a 5-year-old who wears this all the time? He thinks he's safe, right? I'm keeping my teacher safe. I'm keeping my friends safe. I'm keeping myself safe. Well, it's not his job. It's not his job to keep everyone else safe. When did you put that on a 5-year-old, right? Think about it. It is insane. I'm sure you can hear my voice shaking. My heart is pounding because as a mama bear, and those are our babies, you don't mess with the babies, right? For 2 years, they are the only ones that are still being messed with. And I know you guys can't do anything tomorrow, but if you go home tonight and you think about how like a whole generation of children where you're overseeing to some degree, they're ruining. They're ruined. And we have no idea how badly because we'll just have to wait and see and readjust later when it's probably too late, when a few of them probably kill themselves, right? Think of, like, it sounds so extreme, but this is reality because some politicians have to like beat their chests, right? We can move and we can have no masks anywhere. You have to go to New York, you have to put it on your face. Here, you can go to ShopRite, no mask. It's not about health, okay? I think some of you might know that, some of you might not.
But we have to really use some common sense, okay? I kiss my little babies before I came tonight. They're sitting on the couch and they have to sit next to each other. No matter which couch they're on, they're on top of each other. And it's I know I'm doing a good job as their mom because they have no idea how screwed up our world is right now. They have no idea because I will not let them see it. I will not let them see me wear this. I will not have them have teachers with it on their faces. And I will not let them have friends who have to wear masks on their faces to have a play date or walk the dog outside. Everyone needs to just be a little more commonsensical and human to each other. Smile and address and connect and stop hiding behind.
Thank you, Mrs. Lenang. I just ask that we do keep it PG, though. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Kelly Sullivan. I live at 547 Brook Ave in Rivervale. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I know it's a thankless job. I know you guys, and most of you are volunteers. I know I've talked to Ms. Nori quite a few times, and I know that you guys are truly doing everything you can to give our kids a normal experience. So I'd like to start with that. I do have a couple concerns that I'd like to bring to the board, and you can tell I'm shaking too. I hate this. But since Christmas break, my daughter has had to quarantine 2 times. Both times she remained healthy. Both times she's on vax. Both times it was a vax student that gave it to her. So I know somebody else has already brought this up, but I really do think that we need to look more into this test to stay option because she is getting really far behind. And I have reached out to the principal and the guidance counselors and the teachers, and they are all truly fabulous. They went out of their way to help her both times. So I really appreciate that. But it doesn't change the fact that she is getting behind, and I don't know what else to do for her. So if there is something that you guys can do to help these kids stay in school, it would be really amazing for them. So that's my first thing. The second thing is that my daughter says that the masks are muffling the teachers' voices, which makes sense. The teacher's at the front of the classroom, the voice is muffled. So she's trying to hear. She has difficulty hearing. So she kind of moves around, but they've got a plexiglass or plexiplastic. She said she thinks it's plastic. She says that in her math class, for example, there's one spot on the lower left that she can look through to see the board. So she can't hear the teacher. She can't see the board. So she's really not learning. And again, I've reached out to Mr. Cody and he's moved her multiple times. But I guess my question is there any way that we can have these plexiplastics cleaned? Or maybe remove them because they're all wearing masks or something, so at least she can see the board. I mean, they're not allowed to stand up, so she's sitting there with this plastic around her and she can't see and she can't hear. So it's a problem. So is there anything that we could do for that?
Yeah, we've actually been looking into that. Cleaning is one thing, but we are looking into if we can remove them.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's great news. Okay, and then my other thing is just, I do serve lunch there, and there is a 6th grade gym class. And a lot of times they do come and they're sweating and they're panting a little bit, and it's just the mask thing again. I mean, I just really think that especially when they're in any type of high intensity, that maybe the mask should not be worn.
Correct. Yeah, during high intensity, it should not be worn. And we want to keep everybody in school as much as possible, and that's where it gets tricky. When the masks come off, the close contact definition changes, but yes, these are all things that we also keep us all up at night as well.
I know. And again, I know that you're doing everything you can for these kids to have a normal experience. It's the whole thing is just very sad. You said something earlier about not so much test to stay, because that doesn't sound like that is a feasible option. But do these kids if they've had an exposure at school, is that a mandate that they have to stay home?
It's part of policy, so that's what I'm saying, like, it gets a little tricky to go, it's a much larger conversation. So, again, you're always welcome to reach out to me, we can kind of talk about the details of that.
Okay. Because when my daughter was quarantined, as I said, 2 times since Christmas break.
Right.
I was desperate. I was like, I'll do anything. I'll get her tested every single day.
Right.
She had no symptoms.
Right.
She was totally healthy, but she had to stay home, and it was really hard.
Yeah, that's why we're all kind of jumping at the bit to try to find out, like, how do we get the test to be feasible?
Something, just anything, so they can stay in school. All right, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking about the room and I don't see anybody getting ready to stand up. So if there's nobody else at this point, and appreciate all your comments and thank you very much for coming. I'm going to close the meeting to the general comments and move on. And we're closing to general comments at approximately 8:52. Okay. And thank you again for coming and voicing your concerns. Now we're going to go to old business. Is there any old business to take care of? No old business, but I know that there's new business. So with regard to the new business, we have in front of us an addendum, and we have are we going to vote on each one separately or together?
There are 3 action items on the addendum. The first is to award the renovations at Roberge Elementary School. The second is to award the renovations of the rooftop HVAC project at the Woodside School. And the third action item is to provide additional construction management services for the months of April through September, because that's when we're going to have multiple sites working and we're going to need some additional oversight for construction management to make sure that everything moves smoothly.
Okay, thank you. So that's new business resolutions NB1 through NB3. So as we move forward, will somebody move it?
I'll move it.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Any questions about NB1 through NB3? No? Okay. So, roll call vote, please.
Certainly. Mrs. Berkowitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Rothenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schlereth?
Yes.
Mrs. Sanande?
Yes.
And Mr. Rossini?
Yes. So, are we going into close? No? Okay. So, we're not going into closed session. So, is there a motion to conclude the board meeting?
I'll move it.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out. And that concludes the meeting.